Please be seated. There is an additional scripture reading this morning that is not in your bulletin, but it will be on PowerPoint. It's from Ezekiel, and this was not added until after the bulletin was made. I apologize for that, but it gives a lot of insight into how we should read the gospel lections this morning.
Turning to the reading from Ezekiel chapter 34 this morning, beginning with verse 1. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so has been plundered and has become food for all the wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than for my flock, therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds, and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in all the settlements in the land. I will tend them in a good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. But the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and rid the land of savage beasts so that they may live in the wilderness and sleep in the forests in safety. I will make them and the places surrounding my hill of blessing. I will send down showers in season. There will be showers of blessing. The trees will yield their fruit, and the ground will yield its crops. The people will be secure in their land. They will know that I am the Lord, when I break the bars of their yoke and rescue them from the hands of those who enslave them. They will no longer be plundered by the nations, nor will wild animals devour them. They will live in safety, and no one will make them afraid. I will provide for them a land renowned for its crops, and they will no longer be victims of famine in the land or bear the scorn of the nations. Then they will know that I, the Lord their God, am with them, and that they, the Israelites, are my people, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you. Will you please pray with me? Lord God, may the meditations of all of our hearts that are here this morning, may the words that flow from my lips truly be pleasing in your sight. For Lord, you are our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Our journey through the I am statements of Jesus continues this morning. And to date, we have looked at the idea of what the I am, or where the I am comes from, right? Rooted in Exodus 3:14, when God, speaking through the burning bush, tells Moses, tell the Israelites, tell the Hebrew people, I am who I am. And Jesus, taking this term I am, uses it as a teaching moment when he says, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, before Abraham was, I am. And then today, he says, I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. These particular two I ams are found within the greater pericope we're going to read this morning of John chapter 10, verses 1 to 21, which is known as the Great Shepherd Discourse. And when we come to this, we just need to realize there is no transition from the end of chapter 9 and the beginning of chapter 10, which tells us that we're still in that same story. And in that, at the end of chapter 9, we learn that the Pharisees had just expelled a formerly blind man whom Jesus had healed from the local synagogue because he held faith in Jesus as the Messiah, as the long-awaited Son of David. This man's faith in Jesus placed him directly within the trajectory of the Jewish religious leaders who did not welcome Jesus' teachings, his preaching, his healing, or his mission. And it's against this backdrop of this poor man who had been healed of his blindness and been kicked out of the temple by those who were supposed to shepherd him and love him and care for him, that Jesus speaks the Great Shepherd Discourse. So hear now God's word from John chapter 10. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. The Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why should we listen to him? verse said, "These are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?" This is the word of the Lord. Using the metaphor of the flock to describe the people of God is an everyday feature of Jewish life in the ancient world, and it pervades the entirety of the Old Testament text. In Genesis, the Psalms, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, God makes himself known as Israel's shepherd. His people are the sheep of his pasture. Perhaps one of the most popular and enduring images that we have of the entire Old Testament is found in the beginning words of the 23rd Psalm, right? Which is this beautiful poetry is beloved by Jews and Christians alike. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures." I think we heard a lot of that from the Ezekiel reading this morning. Certainly part of this imagery was also the notion of a chief shepherd, assistant shepherds, and hired hands. Right? Think of King David. He was a shepherd before he was a king, and he became the prototype of God's shepherd. In the Ezekiel reading, God said that he will put his son David to shepherd his people. Well, he was not speaking of the King David because he'd been dead for 400 years at that time. Right? He's speaking of one from the line of David who was to come. In 10:1, at the very beginning of our reading, Jesus used the term sheep pen, which was typically one of two kinds of structures. The first could have been a very small enclosed gate outside of a person's or family's residence, which was very common in the ancient world, and is still common to this very day in certain parts of the world. But it appears in this particular lesson that Jesus gives, he is speaking of a larger, more independent structure that sits perhaps right outside of the community, perhaps like a giant corral, and within that corral are smaller penned-in areas where families could place their sheep, and there would have been one way in and one way out. They would have hired an under-shepherd to guard the one gate that led to the multiple pens. Now, those who are authorized to enter the sheep pen would use the gate. It makes sense. The guy who's guarding or the gal who's guarding the sheep knows who the person is and lets them in. However, those who have an interest in stealing, right, or maiming the sheep would avoid the gate, and they would come in some other way. They would climb over the top of the gate or the fence, or perhaps try to crawl under it in order to get in. And the point at which Jesus is teaching here seems pretty clear. The shepherd who hires the under-shepherd to watch and guard the gate, he knows the sheep. And the sheep know the shepherd. And it's the shepherd who leads them out to pasture for their own good. But in verses 7 and 9, Jesus states that he is the gate for the sheep. Isn't that an interesting term to say that you're the gate for the sheep? It is only through him. Okay? It is only through him that people can be led to sweet pasture. He also states that all who came before him were either thieves or robbers, and their intent was to deceive, to harm, and to lead people astray. Jesus states emphatically, "I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in, and they will go out, and they will find pastures." This is an exclusive claim of Jesus, the great I am, the bringer of salvation into the world. He says it is only through him that people can be saved. As a people of faith, we are faced, in our pluralistic world in which we live, with a multitude of other teachings regarding Jesus, regarding faith, regarding salvation, and many of these teachings are even found within the church. such as, there are many paths to God. You heard that before? Good people go to heaven when they die. All religions essentially teach the same thing. I've heard all those things. I've heard many of those things right here at St. Luke. And we must ask ourselves this morning, is this what Jesus teaches? Does he give us these options, or does Jesus himself say something else? We read that Jesus knows his sheep, that he died for them. He calls them by name, and they hear him. This is the gospel that he commanded his disciples to preach to the entire world in order to save sinners, to pierce the darkness that surrounds us. At verse 11, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. A hired hand will typically look out for their own self-interest. If there's a bear, a wolf, or a lion that attacks the flock under the under-shepherd's care, they're typically going to run and try to preserve their own lives. But Jesus says that he will lay down his life for his sheep. He's not about preserving his own self-interest and his own life, but rather he is doing whatever is necessary to protect those in his flock that his Father has given him. Jesus is most interested in being faithful and submissive to the will of his Father for the salvation of his people. The Good Shepherd's act, of laying down his life on behalf of the sheep, is in effect a substitutionary offering. One life is given in exchange for the life or lives of others. And Jesus is surely drawing our attention to the suffering servant that we read about in Isaiah. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds, by his stripes, we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. A righteous shepherd who cares for the sheep, who has the best interest of the sheep in mind and is willing to lay his life down to protect the sheep. Let's look at Ezekiel for just a few moments, which Miriam read this morning. Ezekiel is one of the most fascinating books in the Old Testament, and yet it's one that is rarely read in Sunday morning worship. And Ezekiel is a young man. He lived during the time of the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem, a time when the city was captured. It was burned to the ground. The temple to the Lord, which King Solomon had built, was destroyed. Ezekiel was among the first of the people taken into exile. It's believed along with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and you're listening, and Abednego, right? They're part of the first group of exiles that was taken away from Jerusalem. And we know that throughout the course of this horrific event that was taking place, that Ezekiel's wife died. She was taken away from him. And during his lifetime, the people of God living in exile were hungry for a word of encouragement from God. They were desperate for a word of hope. Think of the letter that Jeremiah writes to the exiles in order to encourage them in their time of need and want. So in a series of oracles, right, God comes to Ezekiel and God gives him both bad news and good news. And Ezekiel's a good Calvinist. He doesn't know he's a good Calvinist yet, because Calvin doesn't exist for 2,000 more years. But the whole idea with Calvinism is you always bring the bad news first, then you follow it with grace, because the ultimate sovereign God of the universe always wins. So the first 32 chapters or so of Ezekiel is pretty bad news. It's rough. There are some very discouraging words. The imagery is apocalyptic. It's scary. In fact, it's breathtaking when you read about what is happening to the people of God, to the city of God, to the temple of God. But then we hit chapter 33. And there is a real transition in Ezekiel because good news begins to pervade into the oracles he's receiving from God. And for the next 15 chapters, it's basically good news. And Ezekiel is given visions of not only what it's going to look like when the people are brought home and they're restored from exile, but he also gives visions of what it's going to look like in the coming kingdom when the entire creation is restored to the way it's supposed to be, to the way that God intended for it to be in the very beginning. The Good Shepherd of chapter 34, which was read this morning, was certainly a foundational understanding of what that blessing that God was going to give was going to look like. And the people in Jesus' day would have picked up on this referent to Ezekiel 34 immediately. Ezekiel writes that the shepherds of Israel have, quote, not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured. They have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. They have ruled them harshly and brutally. He's bringing charges against the shepherds, the religious leaders, over God's people. And he goes on. He says, but God, the Good Shepherd says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of cloud and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel and the ravines and in all the settlements of the land. I will tend them in good pasture. And the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. They will lie down in good grazing land, and they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. Beautiful imagery of this good shepherd who is coming, who are going to gather these sheep who are scattered, who is going to love on them and provide for them and make sure that the troubles of the world cannot prevail upon them. And he goes on to give some clear statements of how God, as the Good Shepherd, is going to make this take place. What will the identity of God look like as he is the Good Shepherd? And he writes, I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I will send down showers in the season. There will be showers of blessing. The trees will yield fruit, and the ground will yield its crops. The people will be secure in their land. They will know that I am the Lord when I break the bars of their yoke and rescue them from the hands of those who enslave them. So when we look at all this material, the question for us today is pretty simple. Do we trust in Jesus' claims to be who he says he is, or do we give a different identity to him? Now, we've talked many times about the new moral religion that has manifested itself in the Western world, in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in Western Europe. And it's known as moralistic therapeutic deism. And it's rooted itself not only within secular worlds, but also within the greater church itself. And just very briefly, moralistic therapeutic deism asserts that there, number one, is a God who exists, who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on the earth. That is, this God created, put the natural laws into place, Then took his hands off. 2, God wants people to be good, to be nice, and to be fair to each other as taught in the Bible and most of the world's religions. 3, the central goal of life, is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. I think we've all heard that in sermons, different places, haven't we? In books. Next, God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. And finally, good people go to heaven when they die. Whether we realize it or not, moralistic therapeutic deism, these bullet points which I gave, have replaced the gospel in many, many churches in the world. And it is a complete antithesis to what Jesus himself presents. He is the great I am. He is the very act of God, who is God, who has come down to earth to bring salvation. He is intimately and personally involved in every facet of our lives because he loves us, because he cares about us, and he does want the best things for us. But God is not intent, Jesus is not intent to play second fiddle in our lives. It's not about us having a plan for our lives, having a vision for our lives, having everything laid out that we want to do, that we want to accomplish, and then inviting God in to be our co-pilot and walk with us through our plans. If that is where you are at in your life, that is the wrong place to be. Rather, God has a plan for each and every single one of us because he intimately loves each and every single one of us. And God invites us into God's plan, into God's will, into God's provision. And it is when we walk in that plan that God has for us that we will be closest with our Heavenly Father. Jesus says, I am the gate, and I am the good shepherd. Not only does he lead us to salvation, he is salvation. Truth is not some abstract philosophical principle that we read about in philosophy and textbooks. Truth is a person, the very embodiment of God, who became a human being, who laid down his life that we may live. To him, the Father and Spirit, be all glory, honor, and praise, now and forever. Amen. Our closing song, Please Rise, is one we have never done before. It's a beautiful song. I think you will learn it quickly, and you will do it for a couple of weeks. Come on.